On the line with us is Professor Richard Wolff. Professor Wolff is the Economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, author of numerous books, including The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. Democracyatwork.info is the website, and you can see him on Twitter at Prof. Wolff, P-R-O-F-W-O-L-F-F. Professor Wolff, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you with us. So Russia has come out now. Putin, his government has come out and said that, yeah, we're going to continue selling oil in world markets, even if we can't accept dollars because we can't clear them through our banks. But you're going to have to start paying us in rubles. I'm curious what this means, what impact this could have. And maybe we should even start at the beginning. Why are oil sales all around the world typically denominated in dollars? Or for that matter, what does the dollar being the world's reserve currency even mean? And what might this crisis with Russia, if you want to call it, if it's probably not quite the right word, how might that change the global order of things?
All right, let's go quickly through it. The reason the dollar is the world currency is the same as the reason that the dollar is used to settle most global transactions that involve buying or selling oil or petroleum products. And that's because the United States, since the end of World War II, if not even earlier, has been the overwhelmingly dominant economy in the world. The potential competitors, Britain, Germany, Japan, were all wiped out in World Wars I or II or both of them, and it left the United States the only one standing. Now, anyone who understands human history knows that couldn't have lasted for very long because of the peculiar way it happened and because every empire in the past disappeared sooner or later. But, the people who are living in one tend to believe it'll last forever. And so the world became accustomed in the decades after 1945 to doing most anything in dollars. There were even countries whose local currency was pushed out and they began to use dollars even though they were a completely different country. And that has continued until recent years, and it's very, very important. In recent years, it has been understood by the rest of the world that using dollars gives an enormous subsidy to the United States. Basically, think of it this way. Normally, a country like us buys things from the rest of the world and sends them dollars, and then they turn around and use the dollars to buy things produced here in the United States. So workers produce wealth over there and exchange it, in effect, for wealth produced here, which we ship over there. Imagine then a system like the last 75 years where they send us, French wine or iron ore from Australia or whatever, and all we send them is costless little green pieces of paper that say U.S. currency. That's a fantastic arrangement. We give nothing, and the world's wealth flows to this country. It's part of why we were able to enjoy higher standards of living than virtually anywhere else. It was bound to come to an end eventually. And what we're seeing in the world over the last 15 years is it's now coming into its own. First of all, and most important, the rise of China, which now has an enormous economic footprint in the world, and its currency is becoming so important to so many countries on so many different transactions that they're starting to hold the yuan, the Chinese currency, in the way they used to hold the dollar. So instead of holding, say, a 75% dollars and 25% euros, the other big currency, they are now reshuffling and beginning to keep yuan because they need them for international transactions. And so the Chinese get a subsidy, and the Russians, allied with the Chinese, are smiling as they say to us, okay, you want to hit us with sanctions? We'll hit you with some. We'll demand payment for oil and gas, upon which many European countries depend. You'll have to pay us in rubles. You'll have to go and get that ruble by giving us dollars and euros, because we won't give you the rubles otherwise. And you have to get the rubles, and then you send them to us back to pay for the oil and the gas. And that means more and more global business will be conducted by a network of yuan from China, rubles from Russia, and then as other countries participate, and here particularly Iran and India, what you're beginning to do, which we could have foretold, is develop a second alternative global system. The United States' period of being at the top of the heap all by itself is coming to an end. And between you and me, Tom, that's really what this Ukraine war is all about. It's a disaster, of course, for the people there, but it's actually a footnote to this tectonic shift in the world economy as the footprint of the U.S. shrinks with corresponding problems at home, and the economic footprint of China, Russia, Iran, and India begin to emerge in the way we could have said 20 years ago was bound to happen, but now we're actually seeing it no longer in slow motion, but happening fast.
So the dollar dominance around the world after World War II came out of, in large part, and please correct me if my understanding of this is wrong, came out of the Bretton Woods agreements that they had in 1944, as I recall. In fact, it was even before the war was over. They were organizing this. And feel free to fill us all in on what that means, but does that mean that we need to have another international conference like Bretton Woods to kind of nail something down, or does it mean that just by virtue of market pressure, China is approaching GDP of the United States, and they got 3 times, 4 times our population. They're eventually going. Their middle class is larger than our entire population. They're going to get there, and they're going to get there fairly soon. Is it just going to organically happen?
Well, the Bretton Woods, you're quite right. That's when it was done. The American leader there, Harry Dexter White, met with his corresponding leader from England, because only the victors really got together from the war to make the arrangements. The British fellow who really dominated was actually John Maynard Keynes, and he brought his brilliance and his economics together with Dexter White's, and they crafted this global system. The British made an attempt to get the British pound involved, but because Britain was so much smaller than the United States by then, they really couldn't do it. And by default, the United States dollar became the global currency for the next 75 years. And the subsidy we got was enormous from that. Everybody in the world who holds dollars for whatever reason either holds them in cash or, and here you enjoy this irony, lends it back to the United States government, because that's a way of holding a dollar asset that pays you an interest, because the U.S. government has to pay interest on its borrowings. So you have a dollar and you have interest, which means the United States has to send tens of billions of dollars abroad every year to pay interest. And just so you get the irony here, it means the United States is currently sending tens of billions of dollars every year to the People's Republic of China, because it is one of the second largest after Japan, holder of U.S. treasuries, because it has lent the dollars we send there for everything the Chinese send us and lent it back to the government. Ironically, the Chinese loans to the U.S. government help it to send military to Ukraine, even though China is on the other side with Russia. It shows you that you have to keep separate in your mind the political rhetoric, the flag waving, and all of that tough talk from the underlying economic reality. And it's crystal clear that it's that reality, the rise of China and the relative decline of the United States, that's going to call the shots, and that these little skirmishes horrible as they are for the people involved, like in the Ukraine, are footnotes to this shift in the world, which Americans have taken a long time to come to terms with, and indeed most Americans still don't want to face.
Professor, well, we have a minute and a half here before we hit a hard break I can't control. England was kind of in the catbird seat at the beginning of World War I, if my recollection is correct, and the English Empire after World War I basically dissolved.
Right.
And they ceased having a worldwide military. I mean, they still, to some extent, but basically they turned that over to us. Do you see a similar dissolution of America's military role along with our economic role?
Yeah, you can't sustain your military if you're divided at home, as we already are, if you are neglecting your own infrastructure, as we openly admit we have, if you're squeezing the lower two-thirds of your people with levels of economic distress, which we are now doing, it's like a script we're following. We're imploding eventually because we have not developed the foundation economically and politically to play this global role. That's what always happens. The empire overreaches relative to its home base, and then the whole thing falls apart. The irony is, we're all talking about how Russia may fall apart, and that may happen. But what we really ought to be doing is facing all of the factors that suggest we in the U.S. are going to have that problem and are already in the early stages of it. And we need now a conference like Bretton Woods, but with the Russians and the Chinese who have to be there in order to avoid a military catastrophe and try to accommodate the shift rather than pretend we can overwhelm it.
Fascinating, fascinating. Professor Richard Wolff, democracyatwork.info, the website, rdwolff with 2fs.com as well, and Prof. Wolff with 2fs on Twitter. Dr. Wolff, thank you. It's always great talking with you.